Today we turn to Micah chapter 5, and Micah chapter 5 verse 2 is a verse that the early church really looked to as one of those prophetic verses pointing to the life of Jesus. It's a verse that is often read in churches that follow the lectionary set of readings for every Sunday of the year, and it's read during the Advent season. Micah 5:2 is, "But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days." And so here you have in Micah 5:2 God's promise of a ruler. And it's interesting that this idea of a shepherd king, which ties back to the prophets that we have heard before, correct? You think back to Isaiah chapter 40, verses 1 through 11, and the image of God as a shepherd who was going to tenderly care for and lead the mother sheep and her young. You think of what we found in Ezekiel chapter 34, and how God was against the shepherds of Israel who had been enriching themselves and been corrupt and hadn't cared for the weak and the lame and the poor, etc. And we hear it, of course, in the 23rd Psalm that we all know so well about the Lord is my shepherd. And so here you have this promise that there will be a shepherd king. And if you look a little forward, for example, to verse 4, it says, "And he shall stand and feed his flock on the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God, and they shall live secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be the one of peace." You can see why the early church looked at this passage from Micah and said, well, this is about Jesus. And Jesus not only told parables about lost sheep and how he would go and look for the lost one even when there were 99 that were still at home, and how a good shepherd looks for the lost sheep. And of course in John chapter 10 and beginning at verse 11, in one of his I am sayings from John's Gospel, we hear Jesus talk about how I am the good shepherd, and how he knows the sheep, and the sheep know him, and they know his voice, and he calls them by name. And that shepherd king image is one that was obviously very important and very meaningful, not only for Israel, but for Jews in Jesus' time, and one that he took on himself. And I think it's significant that even in his first resurrection appearance in the garden with Mary in John chapter 20, he calls her by name, just as earlier in John's Gospel he had said that I know my own know me, I call them by name, they know my voice, they won't follow a stranger. How blessed we are to have such a personal God, the God who created the universe, and yet a God who knows your name and who knows the sound of your voice. When you lift up your voice in prayer, when you lift up your voice in praise, to know that the Lord knows it's you. What a blessing to have such a great shepherd king.